So I'm going to formally welcome everyone. Now we've had a bit of a chat, but thank you for joining this IABC Zoom meeting today. I know many of the faces, and we've got some regular members here and guests, but for those of you who don't, I'm Ross Monaghan, one of two professional development directors for IABC Asia Pacific. So welcome to this IABC Stronger Together Zoom meeting, where the emphasis on these sessions is not about just listening, it's all about conversations. And today it's about conversations about stories that move people. We've got a great lineup of speakers today that I'll introduce you to in a moment. But first I want to introduce you to my fellow Professional Development Director, Melinda Coyne. Melinda, how are you today?
Very good, very good. This is going to be another good session, part of all the reason why we're part of IABC. But I have always loved storytelling, and I think as comms professionals, particularly IABC community, it's a really powerful tool, isn't it, that we use to kind of connect people. We're wired for storytelling, helps move people to action. But I want to share a quote that I've used before because I love this. So it's from Andy Goodman, who's a storyteller, and he says, "Numbers numb, jargon jars, and nobody marched on Washington because of a pie chart." So if you want to move people to action, you really got to connect with them with their emotions. So I just think that's a lovely way to set the scene here.
Yeah, it is. And as an academic myself, I know when I'm doing seminars or tutorials and I see, sometimes the students get a little bit weary and their attention starts to fade a little bit. When I slip into one of my stories about something that happened to me at work, maybe it was that day that I had to chase a deer around a steelworks and it jumped into the harbour and it stopped a huge boat coming in. We had the TV cameras. It just grabs the students' attention. So that's a really powerful tool that I use, but I'm really looking forward to hearing from our speakers today about some other tips that I can use both in the classroom and with other clients as well, and for IABC. Speaking of which, if you're not an IABC member, you should be. IABC is a global network of communicators in diverse industries and disciplines, and we identify, share and apply the world's best communication practices. As we're doing today, we've got three absolutely outstanding members, but you know what makes this session so amazing is those of you that have joined us. We are stronger together, and I think most IABC members love hearing from experts like we're hearing from today, but also chatting with other IABC members. I like to think of it as a not so secret club, but we might but if you have an issue, you can reach out to IABC members, whether they're in the Asia Pacific region, and we have 12 chapters in eight countries, from India through to New Zealand in this region. You can reach out to members in this region, or you can reach out to members right around the world in Europe, North America. We've got a very strong membership base, and I can tell you our members are just so generous with their time. We have a great range of online resources, and not least of which Melinda and I just were judges for the IABC Gold Quill as well. So if you haven't applied for a Gold Quill, it is an absolutely outstanding award process, and I thoroughly recommend it to you. So if you aren't a member of IABC, now's your time to join. March is membership month. If you join or rejoin IABC individually, there is a 20% discount. If you and your organisation, your fellow colleagues in your organisation want to join us, there's a 25% discount going at the moment as well. So that's really good value. All right, enough of that. I'm really excited to introduce our three guests today. First, one of my favourite storytellers, Soundari Mukherjea, presented for us in IABC a couple of years ago, and it was an absolutely enthralling presentation. So she is a business storytelling coach and an organisational consultant for Soundbites 11. And Soundari, you're joining us from Hong Kong today.
Yes, I am. I'm thrilled to be here, Ross and Mel. Thanks.
Thank you. Also, we have Lucy Siebert, who is the Global Comms Manager at Intrepid Travel. She is a very experienced communicator. She's joining us from Melbourne. Lucy, how are you?
Hi, Ross. I'm well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Really looking forward to this. And finally, Marla Dorasamy has got some great news. We have promoted her as the acting CEO of the Malaysia International Trade and Exhibition Centre, but she's just been appointed the CEO, which is a really fantastic recognition of her achievements. She's joining us from Malaysia, but originally from South Africa. That's right.
That's correct. Good day from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I think thank you to everyone. Yes, from South Africa and in Malaysia for the last 5 years.
And
rich cultures of both countries and really enjoying it.
And you're opening up again on the 1st of April?
Yes, so MyTech has been open since December, I think, but we're really excited that government has announced that borders will open on the 1st of April. And events will go back into full capacity from the 1st of April. So we're super excited and looking forward to welcoming the world to Malaysia.
Well, as the new CEO, you're in for a really challenging but exciting time. So that's great. So the session
Absolutely.
today is going to be each of our speakers is going to talk for about 3 to 5 minutes and then pose a question to our audience. We'll have some opportunities to chat, and then after that we'll go into some breakout rooms for some final conversations if you'd like to join us for that, and then we'll come back into the main room. So I'm going to hand it over to Soundari, who's going to tell us about how and why and how we can use storytelling to move people. Thanks, Soundari.
Thanks, Ross and Mel. I'm thrilled to be here. It's also taking me back to my school days and history lessons. I vividly remember listening in awe to my history teacher talking about the pyramids and Abu Simbel in Egypt, more than 5,200 odd kilometers away from Chennai in India. And that sort of set out my travel bug. So I'm eagerly looking forward to hearing from Lucy and Mala as well on how they are using stories. We all know that stories are a powerful driver of emotional value, and personal stories really connect with an audience. And as communication professionals, we get it that storytelling really helps keep the messaging clear, that is, from the comprehension point of view. It cuts through the noise, so it helps keep attention, and also helps keep messaging sticky, so it makes it retentive in that sense. And while a good story helps us see the picture, what I believe a great story does is takes the listener to feel those moments when you can picture yourself and become part of that story. So, and that's, I think, a crave-worthy moment for all of us in communication, if you can take them there. So I was listening to Gabrielle Dolan, who works out of Australia. She had reframed a famous Jeff Bezos quote, and the reframed version is, "Your brand is the stories people tell of you when you're not in the room." So how we talk about our product is, what I want to talk and quickly share a couple of examples around it. So let's say you're an NGO talking to investors. It could be a founding story, which might be the starting point. And I want to talk about Sam Beer and his story. So Sam Beer is an energetic and bright young man from New Jersey. And since his teenage days, he had one seemingly simple goal: to land a job. And even though Sam's autism diagnosis meant he approached life a little bit differently, he knew he could contribute given the right opportunity. But along with around 85% of autistic adults who experience unemployment, 24-year-old Sam saw that his dream was just slipping away. And then one day, Sam's dad, Steve, had an epiphany. While passing a popcorn shop in East Brunswick, which had a for sale sign outside, and he said, how can I combine Sam's passion and talent with America's favorite snack? And that became Popcorn with a Purpose. 6 years later, the Beer family's non-profit Popcorn for the People employs 30 autistic adults aging from 21 to 56, providing each person an opportunity, a dignity, and self-reliance in the process. And I remember reading about this one particular guy, 25-year-old Patrick Wimmer, And 4 years ago, he would refuse to leave his mother's side. And now he's a star employee, proudly bragging about his impressive popcorn metrics. He just loves coming to work, his mom says, and that's how independent her son has become. So work in an NGO can be a force for transformation, and you can use a founder's story when you're talking to investors, when you're trying to get buy-in for your work that you're doing. Or it could be as simple as talking about your customers, and it's not only about you, right? It's about the customers. And I'm thinking about this particular Spanish restaurant, Columbia restaurant in Florida, which is like more than, I think, 120 odd years old. It's run by the same family, and it was founded in 1905 by a Cuban immigrant, Casimiro Hernandez. And it's considered the oldest restaurant in Florida, and they claim to be the best Spanish restaurant, but that doesn't cut it, right? And they keep posting about stories on their media handle, and this one particular one stood out for me. So a couple went there for their first anniversary to celebrate. The next year they said, oh, maybe we should make it a tradition. So they went to the same restaurant, and it so happened that they got seated at the same table as the previous year. And then they continued this tradition for 73 years in a row. And except for COVID, when they didn't go, they've been sitting and celebrating their anniversary at the same table in the patio dining room, table number 370, and drinking their favorite strawberry pink squirrel cocktail. What a absolutely lovely story to talk about your customer who keeps coming back to you for your place. And I think these are the kind of things which really drive people to go to places. And I've done a lot of that, reading up about some place and then going and visiting that particular restaurant in a particular country because of that story that's been there. So let it be Abu Simbel in Egypt, currywurst in Berlin. Part of the power of stories is that they don't just try to persuade people. Stories are an invitation to understand another perspective, another culture. So I will stop right here. And the question that I have, and as a business owner myself, is what are the stories you want people to talk about your brands, your organizations, when you're not in the room? So I will leave it at that for now. Do you want me to put that question on the chat?
Yeah, and would anyone like to answer that? Marla is, Marla, do you want to jump in there?
No, I was just giving a clap.
I'm just giving a clap, yes.
Yeah, giving a clap, well done. I think I could feel the passion and purpose and, listening to Soundari.
Oh, thanks.
Well, maybe, does anyone want to answer that question? What do you want stories do you want your customers to tell, or your clients to tell about you when you're not in the room? Anyone's got thoughts on that?
I think if there's no one, maybe I should just, give a little bit of, feedback on it. I think it's so important having people to remember something, because it's, when you listen to whether it's a company or a product or something that you are selling, you don't remember what you saw in the product, but you feel the emotion. So you want people to remember something out of the emotion, the sense, the smell out of that. So it's so important that when you tell the story, they feel your passion in what you're saying. I always go back to the Coca-Cola company with their famous line that they sell happiness. So automatically you remember that when you think of Coca-Cola, you think of happiness. So I think each one's got to resonate with something when you're selling it. Is what is it that you're selling that people, it will stir an emotion in you when you tell the story.
Yeah, really good point. I love that. We'll have an opportunity to talk with all of our guests today in the breakout room soon. So now I'm going to hand over to Lucy Siebert. So over to you. Thanks, Lucy.
Great. Thanks, Ross. I'm also excited that I'm not the only South African here today, Marla. So it's great to have two of us. So thanks so much for inviting me here today. It's great to be with you all. Now, I work in corporate comms now, but my background's in editorial and journalism originally. And just quickly before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country I'm on today, the Yalakit Willam clan of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and future. So I'm trying to stick to the 3-minute rule that I've been briefed by Ross. I probably won't make it, but let's give it a try. So as I mentioned, I work in global corporate communications at Intrepid Travel, and I work really closely with our global PR manager and our social media manager. And we really see our roles as internal storytellers and internal journalists, and we see that as like a really fundamental part of our team. And even though my roles more focused on the corporate side of things, the stories are so important. And luckily at Intrepid, we've got some great stories to tell because we are the world's largest adventure travel company and we operate on all 7 continents. So we're actually taking people to places like Machu Picchu in Peru, or Everest Base Camp, or on a foodie adventure in Vietnam, and everything in between. And we're constantly hearing from our customers and sometimes even from our staff and our tour leaders about how a trip changed their lives. And so I think that's a pretty good starting point for a story. So Ross asked me today if I could share a few tips and tricks when it comes to storytelling. So as Mel said in the beginning, I also love the topic of storytelling because humans, we've been telling stories to each other for thousands of years. And secondly, because a great story is always bigger than a channel or a campaign. It's really about getting to the heart of something and then being creative about the way we tell that story. So as we know at the moment, the world's a really complex place. We're all navigating many challenges and working out what it means for our businesses. And for us in travel, the big thing is that travel and travelers have changed, and we can't ignore that. And so the 3 tips for me today, I've got 3 tips for you today. So the first one is that before you can tell your own story or other community stories, you really need to know your purpose or your North Star, sort of that why you do what you do. And you might also need to get some external advice on this. So at Intrepid, our vision is to change the way we all see the world. And as we were thinking about that vision, and the more we thought about that, we realized that we actually needed to be more diverse and inclusive in our storytelling. But we realized we couldn't do that by ourselves. So what we did, we gathered a team of external experts, really amazing people from all sorts of different fields. And they've helped us to shape a framework about how we can move towards being more inclusive in our storytelling at every part of our business. So we have ethical marketing guidelines, and these are underpinned in 5 areas, which I think are just interesting things to think about. Maybe in the context of your business. So that's diversity, equity, and inclusion is one, openness and transparency is a second one, rejecting neo-colonialism, sense of belonging, and ethical digital marketing. So all the details are on our website, and I'm happy to share them here. But I think the big learning is that we couldn't have done that without getting some external advice, and we've just learned so much on that journey. And also having a framework to frame our stories around is a really powerful thing as well. My second tip is don't tell the same stories that you used to or that other people tell. So as I said, we can't ignore that travel's changed, and we can't just go back to telling the same stories we did, before COVID or before the climate crisis. Our storytelling needs to reflect what's happening in the world and to our customers, in our industry, and in our businesses. So I'm sure many of you have heard from your customers who want to know what you're doing on social or environmental issues. And so the first thing I'd definitely be looking, internally at the business to see what you're doing and make sure that you're doing that work internally before, doing anything externally. But then working out how to communicate that through your storytelling. And as a business, Intrepid has committed to halve our carbon emissions by 2030. But we bring that story alive for our customers in a really engaging way. We talk about the climate crisis. We talk about how to be a more responsible traveler. We highlight people who travel sustainably. And this is something we've seen our community really engage with. So for instance, for Earth Day last year, we did a series of posts across social media where we challenged our community. We said, let's talk about decarbonizing travel. And those posts reached over 145,000 people. They had a really strong engagement rate, and it was a great way to kind of tell that story. And I know for some businesses that would be considered quite risky, but we think it's just a really important conversation to have, and storytelling is a way to have that conversation. And then my third tip was know your audience and your business. Now, I know everyone here has heard that a million times before, but I don't think it can be said enough, especially these days when your community might be made up of different audiences across different channels. So we do really pretty detailed monthly reporting across PR, social, corporate comms, and that gives us such good insights into what's resonating, what people are talking about, how we can bring stories to life differently, or what worked. And I think there's a really important piece around being data-led in your storytelling and ensuring you build that culture in your team about using data to understand what's moving the needle. So I think I might leave it there because I'm conscious of time, Ross. I don't know how I've done. But yeah, I think to sum it up, really think about people, your customers, your community, the issues that are impacting them, and how you can bring that storytelling into your business.
Great. And do you have a question to pose to our participants, Lucy, or would
I
you
do.
like to ask if they have questions? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I was going to ask everyone here today, what's the one social or environmental issue that matters most to your community or your audience, and how do you tell that story, or how would you like to tell that story in the future?
Great question.
Drop it in the chat.
That would be fantastic, and we'll be breaking up into the chat room soon. But if anyone wants to answer that or comment on that now. Okay, well, we'll leave that for the breakout rooms, and we'll pass over to our final speaker today, Mala. So take it away.
Thank you, Ross, and I think thank you to the rest of the team. It's been really great listening to, I think Lucy and Soundari and the great advice you have. I think for me, it takes me back to South Africa, if I have to, in terms of storytelling. I think because this is a great tradition that's been done under the trees, and the word that comes to mind for me is Ubuntu. Which means I am because of who others are. And I think that's something we've taken through our business, starting back from the early days in South Africa. When we did business, it was not about going back to textbooks as such, to start talking about your company or start going straight into your vision and mission. It was about trying to understand where you came from. If I start simply from the Durban ICC that was built on a prison site. So when we brought guests in, we started at that point of telling guests what was the history to the company, bringing out the rich culture, the history, the emotions behind what brought that business together. And then if I come through to Malaysia, being at MITEC, which is the Malaysia International Trade and Exhibition Center based in Kuala Lumpur. It is the largest center in Malaysia. So for here, it's a rich history. Tourism is one of the key contributors of the Malaysian economy. The economic contribution based from August last year was 5.9%. So how do I tell the story to the world? Very often you go to trade shows and you don't just sell MITEC. You sell the country first. You sell Malaysia. It starts with a little geography lesson with the map on the table to show people exactly where is Malaysia based. What is the weather? What is the culture? It has such a rich diversity. The food is amazing. I think whoever has come to Malaysia knows that the food is truly tantalizing, from your rich roti canai to the Chinese dishes or your nasi lemak in the morning. It what really stirs up the emotion of what brings people to Malaysia. If I take it to MITEC, the actual building, the roof structure was from the rubber seed. So the entire design is the rubber seed and the songket material. So a very rich fabric design. But if we look back to the economic sectors, it's the rubber industry is a key manufacturing industry that actually drove the economy of Malaysia. So those are all important stories that you start telling about your business, you know, where it's based, what connects people, the places, the senses, bringing the community together before you actually start selling your business or start bidding. So for very often on the business event sector, possibly different to other sectors of the business, we would go out to the world and we would bid firstly for Malaysia, then for Kuala Lumpur, and then we would bid for MyTech to host this event. So very importantly is to tell the story of the culture, what drives the economic impact of the country. My team also very often would know, you know, before we go out to attract business, we need to understand what is driving the economy of Malaysia. How can we contribute to this economic impact? Will it create jobs for the future, jobs for the economy, as well as will there be a legacy program? So it's not as simple as just bringing the business in, but what is the ripple effect and how is it going to impact the daily lives of people before we secure the business? You know, understanding the triple bottom line impact that impacts the world and the country. And as individuals, making sure that you're passionate enough to tell the story. You know, when you go out and you're selling a big empty space, and it's not just about saying MyTech has 52,000 square meters of space, but this is a blank canvas. How do you paint the picture that people can see that this is a blank room, but it's where dreams are created, where events and rich beginnings are created and important messages will be done. So it's being able to tell the story that people start feeling the passion to create their story when they create this event. It's all about the legacy and the story that will be left behind. You know, it's about telling common goals and values, the vision in the story. You know, very often when you say you bring an event to a country, people need to understand what does it do for the country. You know, by securing an event, it's not just about the business bottom line, but, you know, it's people coming to hotels, it's the tourism increasing, it's jobs created. The person selling songket material, which is famous in Malaysia, they are getting business. It's the sustainability stories that are being told. And thereon, it's the legacy that's created after that. So important in terms of universities understanding what they need to do in terms of driving business, in terms of R&D, you know, research and development that takes place, and as well as the technical side that gets developed when you bring business. So it's not, I think when I look specifically at the business events section, it's not just tourism, not just business events, but there's an entire global economic impact that happens when you secure business. So very important that everyone feels the purpose when you tell the story of your business. And it doesn't start with just your business. You always start with the bigger picture. What is the impact before you tell the story of your business? I think that's the long and short from me. I think my question to everyone is, what is the passion story that drives your purpose?
What is the passion story that drives your purpose? Like that question. And I also liked your quote, using stories to paint a picture. That was fantastic. Mel, what did you think of all those tips? Have you been taking notes? There's some great tips there.
I love them. I love them. So Lucy, love, you know your customers and community, be data led. I think that's such a great tip, particularly, you know, for comms professionals, using those insights, but using them to tell powerful stories. Know your purpose. That's something I know Ross and I've particularly been interested in, been doing, and sort of in other activities. Ross has been leading a lot of that. Soundari, I really love that quote, and thank you for reminding us of it, which is, your brand is the story that people tell about you when you're not in the room. Mala, I love Ubuntu. I'm the cause of who others are. I love that. tell the story of the culture, show common goals and values, and everyone must feel the purpose and start with the impact that everyone feels. So I hope I have sort of summarized it faithfully. I'm sure there's lots of room there for interpretation, but I just really grateful for those tips, and hope everyone else picked up on those.
Yeah, look, that was a great summary, and I really liked the recurring words that came up about stories, telling the stories of cultures and having a passion to tell your story and the social issues, and some great tips there. I think that was fantastic. We're going to go into some breakout rooms now for small group sessions. We'll probably do that for about 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll come